a warm welcome to all of those who are tuning in tonight to join us for this very exciting panel, connecting the dots from coral bleaching to climate gentrification to celebrate World Oceans Day 2020. My name is Umberta Groendorf. I am the co-founder and executive producer of the ArtCell Residency and Research Initiative, and I have the great pleasure to be your host and the moderator for tonight's panel. 2020 will be remembered as a year of unprecedented level of anxiety for the entire planet. And yet, witnessing how local communities came together to support those on the front lines, and seeing examples of international collaboration to fight one common enemy, instilled hope in those of us who have been advocating for the same level of global mobilization to combat another lingering existential crisis, and that is the climate crisis. Among the ecosystems that are most at risk from climate change and man-made pollutions are the coral reefs. And we know that up to 25% of all ocean species depend on reefs for food and shelter. North America's only barrier reef lies in our own backyard, and it is the third largest barrier reef in the system in the world, extending for 70 miles. It contains over 50 species of corals. However, over the course of the past 20 years, more than 50% died off for a variety of causes, spanning from man-made pollution to natural diseases and overall higher water temperature. But warmer waters also, along with land ice melt, are also the driving causes of sea level rise, an issue that unfortunately all of us Miamians are very familiar with. And with the sea rising, communities are being displaced as developers are looking for higher grounds for safer investments. A concern that neighborhoods like Little Haiti, Liberty City, and Little Havana have been battling with in recent years. So we're here tonight with a panel of experts of climate activists, community organizers, marine scientists, who are going to dive deeper in these issues and help us understand how they're all connected to each other. Now, let me share a few words about ArtCell and what we do. ArtCell is a residency and research initiative that I co-founded in 2015 that brings together artists and cultural producers with climate scientists, activists, responsible businesses, and marine experts to investigate how climate change is impacting the South Florida waterways and create artwork with enduring value advocacy that can help us spread not only awareness about the issues that we'll be exploring, but also to help communities to move from awareness to climate action. And to set the context for tonight's conversation, I'll be sharing with you a video documenting the very last project that we worked on exactly a year ago in June 2019 with artist Cecilia Tripp and sound architect Kerwin Rowland. Cecilia and Kerwin were in Miami for about a month, and we organized a series of expeditions, both diving and snorkeling, that enabled them to record the sound of marine ecologies around coral reefs in South Florida, from Key Biscayne to the Upper Keys, that enable them to work and edit and create an amazing soundscape, which is about 8.5 minutes long, that is called the Coral Sonata, which brings to life the sound of climate change and the plight of coral reefs. Now, Carolina will be putting in the chat the link to SoundCloud so that you can all listen to the full sonata. And I will be now starting the video, which again will show you the making of the sonata with Cecilia Tripp and Kerwin Rowland.
I am Cecilia Tripp. I'm an artist and filmmaker, and I got invited by Arts residency here in Miami with my project Coral Sonata. Here we are recording inside the reef, the bleached ones and the living ones, and we are going to develop a score out of it. The coral reef is the image of humanity because it is one coral made of many corals as one body. I've been working a lot with Edouard Glissant, the philosopher from Martinique, who named it poetics of relation. Everything is related. As he said, nothing is true, everything is alive.
I'm Kerwin Roland, and I'm a Paris-based sound architect. You have some kind of a base, substrate for this whole environment, and this sound is very peculiar because it's like a crispy, clicking, overwhelming sounds like.
We're gonna dive in. Kerwin is going to record the sounds. He's going to attach himself to a mooring so he can stay in place for 4 to 5 minutes to actually record sound in the most pristine way so it doesn't hear us breathing or the flapping of the fins.
You have to focus to hear other sounds that are appearing, which frequencies are appearing in this bubbly, clicky sound texture environment.
You hear all the microcosms around. There's like all these very, very small, very, very tiny sounds which are around.
There's a lot of footage and there are many things to hear.
Yeah.
We also have all we want to actually at least communicate or explain lots of things about underwater life. The idea is to create a choral sonata, meaning going very thoroughly from the scientific aspect, going through the research, be able to communicate it, being able to transform this whole research into sound material, soundscape, and eventually music.
Our planetary future is haunted by the sea level rise, triggering climate gentrification as happening now in Tahiti, Miami, being on higher grounds. It is a continuity of 1 billion black Anthropocenes, as Catherine Yusuf names it. We are collaborating with conscious contractors from Tahiti who are very engaged in saving their community and in raising awareness.
We're standing in front of what is being proposed as Magic City innovations, but we call it Magic City invasion. You got to realize that Miami City is at ground zero level when it comes to sea level rise. And the developers are coming up to this area, and the price of real estate has soared 200, 300, 600 times. The only way we're going to solve the question of climate change is educating communities and empowering communities, putting the resources where they need to be at.
Into this realm of earth, life, prosperity, peace, and we're asking is anybody else around who can teach us, add on to what we already learned.
So first, Olivia Collins, she is a director of programs at the Clio Institute. Born and raised in rural Canada, Olivia has lived in many places before settling in Miami in 2017. She has over 15 years of experience in the environmental field, from natural building to corporate social and media responsibility to grassroots community development. She received her bachelor degree in social justice and sustainability from San Francisco State University, and several years later completed her master's in environmental impact assessment at Concordia University in Montreal. As director of programs, she helps oversee and execute CLIO's outreach program. Cecilia, I'll leave it to you to take it from here. I'm sorry, so Olivia, I'll leave it to you to take it from here. Are you still there? Welcome.
I'm here. Thank you, Ombretta. Thank you everyone for your patience. For the sake of bandwidth, I'm going to turn my video off while I'm presenting just to make sure there's no glitches. So thank you again, Ombretta, for the introduction. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for all the panelists. Like Ombretta said, my name is Olivia and I'm the Director of Programs for the CLIO Institute, and we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Miami with offices in Orlando and Tallahassee, and we're solely dedicated to climate change, education, and advocacy. Our goal is really to help citizens connect the dots on climate change, understand how it's impacting them in their life, and helping them figure out ways that they can take action at home, but as well as in their community. So today I'm going to present in a really quick 4.5-minute presentation what's causing climate change and the impacts that it's having on our oceans. So to make a very long scientific story short, we are experiencing global warming and we are in a climate crisis. And that's in large part due to the fact that humanity is still largely dependent on fossil fuels such as oil, coal, and gas to meet its energy needs. When we burn fossil fuels, we emit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. Greenhouse gases have the property of trapping heat in our atmosphere and radiating it back towards Earth. As we emit excessive amounts of greenhouse gases, we are also trapping excessive amounts of heat, which is then being radiated back. And that's why we're in the crisis that we find ourselves today. This is a great visual from NASA showing how the temperature has warmed on planet Earth since the 1880s, right around the time when the Industrial Revolution started. As you can see, we've seen a large amount of temperature increase, but when we look at in a degrees point of view, the temperature has warmed by 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. While 1 degree doesn't seem like a lot, it's actually quite a lot for our ecosystems on planet Earth. And the last 5 years have been the hottest on record. So what does that mean for Earth's ice? When we pull back a little bit, it's really important to look at land ice and sea ice because global warming is impacting both of these, which is impacting us in Florida. Ice sort of serves as Earth's air conditioning system, if you will. The ice, sort of light colored surfaces, help reflect some of that sunlight back into space, and it keeps a certain balance. Under normal circumstances, the greenhouse gas effect is balanced, but again, because we're emitting so much of excessive amounts of greenhouse gases, things are out of balance. So we're losing sea ice as the Earth warms. And when sea ice shrinks, it exposes a lot of that dark ocean water. And that dark ocean water then absorbs more heat. And that heat then melts more ice. And then we have what's sort of referred to as a positive feedback loop, but it's not really a positive thing. And we're also losing our land ice, which is ice sheets and glaciers. And when land ice melts, that contributes directly to sea level rise as well. So today is World Oceans Day, so I'm going to focus a few slides on oceans before I pass it on to Dalton. So as I mentioned, the planet is getting warmer. We're in a climate crisis. Our oceans cover about 70% of the planet, and they play a really important role in stabilizing our climate, and they're also huge carbon sinks. To date, oceans have absorbed almost 93% of excess heat that's been caused by greenhouse gas emissions. As a result of the warming of the oceans, oxygen concentrations are also declining. And that's because in warmer waters, oxygen is less soluble, which means the gas cannot dissolve as easily. And as you can imagine, Oxygen plays a really important role for a lot of our marine ecosystems that are dependent on it. And because we're emitting so much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, the ocean also is absorbing more carbon dioxide than usual. Our oceans are currently absorbing more than a quarter annually of our carbon dioxide emissions, which is leading to ocean acidification. So these are some of the main impacts that the climate crisis is having on our oceans. And as you can imagine, this is having impacts on our marine ecosystems. In particular, our coral reefs. As Ombretta mentioned earlier, our reefs play a really important role, not only for other marine life, but in Florida, especially for our economy. People are drawn to Florida and it creates a lot of tourism. We have a lot of snorkeling and diving. And one fact that a lot of people don't know is that our reefs are our first coastal defense system against storm surge. So when we lose our coral reefs, we also lose our ability to protect our communities, our coastal communities, from storm surge with natural defenses. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef has suffered many different bleaching events in the last decade, and less known to some people is that this year it's also experiencing a massive bleaching event. And that's because the pandemic and other major crises around the world have taken precedence in the media. Our coral reefs bleach when the ocean temperature gets too warm. I won't go into too much of the science behind that because I know that Dalton might touch on that later. But when it comes to the Florida Keys, we know that less than 10% of the reef system is now alive and well. So again, our coral reefs are not only important to other marine creatures, they provide habitat, but they're also important to Florida's economy. And again, they are our first defense against storm surge. I included this slide today because although this is not a direct impact, our dependence on fossil fuels is also having a major impact on oceans in a different way, right? We have to transport this fuel, we have to store this fuel around the world, and accidents happen, whether it's in a pipeline, on a train, or just in some sort of storage container like recently happened last week in the Arctic in Siberia. More than 20,000 tons of diesel leaked out of a container that it was being stored in. Now, the irony behind this is that the container was destabilized because of the melting permafrost that it was sitting on. And the permafrost is melting because of global warming. So the melting permafrost destabilized the soil, which the container was sitting on. The container fell, broke, and released 20,000 tons, which apparently is one of the biggest accidents to happen in this area. It's contaminated 2 major rivers and its tributaries, and of course will eventually lead to the ocean. So the message that I want to share with you today is that climate change is a threat multiplier. It impacts every single aspect of our life, and it impacts all of our ecosystems, especially our ocean and marine ecosystems. And we not only depend on these ecosystems for survival, but also for our quality of life. And that's precisely what the climate change is impacting as well. If you guys want to know more about Clio and know more about climate change, I'll put my email in the chat box. Feel free to email me directly, or you can also follow us on social media. Our handle is the Clio Institute. Thank you, Ombretta.
Great, thank you so much, Olivia. You did a fantastic job in making us understand how climate change is impacting our ocean. And then if you can stop your share, I will pass this on to Dalton Hesley. So Dalton J. Hesley is a program manager for Rescue Reef at the University of Miami. Dalton is a senior research associate in Dr. Diego Lurman's Coral Reef Restoration Lab at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School. His main areas of focus are coral reef restoration, community engagement, and citizen science. In addition to being a lab associate, he manages Rescue Reef, UM's coral conservation program designed to support coral reef research and restoration through education, outreach, and citizen science. He obtained a Master of Professional Science degree in Marine Biology and Ecology in 2015, where his thesis centered around coral conservation, citizen science, and Rescue Reef. And let me just say something quickly because I didn't get to do my housekeeping announcement. So anyone who's interested and has any questions, please make sure you use the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A box, and we are keeping the chat for internal communication, and that's where we will be posting any links that are relevant for you, as Olivia mentioned, for example, her contact, etc. So Dalton, thank you so much for being part of this panel tonight, and I'll leave the floor to you, and now you can share your screen. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Umberta. As she mentioned, my name is Dalton Hesley. I'd like to welcome and thank you all for being here tonight. Happy World Oceans Day. This is really quite the honor to speak and share our part of ocean conservation on this celebratory day. So as she mentioned, I am a senior research associate in the Coral Restoration Lab at University of Miami's Rodenstiel School, but I also manage our Rescue Reef program, which is a community project aimed at advancing our efforts. So as many of you know, coral reefs are one of the most diverse and significant ecosystems on this planet. They are also incredibly beautiful, but unfortunately, as you heard a moment ago, this is no longer the picture that we see in South Florida. This is more closely resembling the current state of our coral reefs. In fact, offshore of Miami, coral reef cover is less than 5%, which is alarmingly low. So what does that mean for us? Well, coral reefs provide a number of significant roles to us every day as coastal communities. As you heard, one of the most significant is coastal protection. Coral reefs actually absorb up to 97% of offshore wave energy, so that's really our first line of defense. They're also essential habitat for reef organisms, whether that's home, habitat, spawning, or feeding grounds. Those same reef organisms may actually feed local communities. In fact, billions of people rely on marine protein for their main source of food. All of that translates to jobs. South Florida is intrinsically tied to our coral reef ecosystems through fisheries, tourism, recreation, and many things in between. So all of that equates to a lot of money, hundreds of billions of dollars in value. So we have a lot invested in our coral reefs, and it's our job to ensure their sustainability. So what are some of the threats that coral reefs are facing? Coastal development, with us continuously building on our shorelines and disrupting habitat. Overfishing, because we're simply too reliant on those marine resources. Pollution and disease, as we increase human pressure on those nearshore ecosystems, and our changing climate. Increased CO2 levels is leading to increased air temperatures, ocean temperatures, increased ocean acidification, a number of different issues that are impacting corals quite significantly. And as you see at the bottom, most of these are human induced, but that means that we can address them. All we have to do is figure out how they're intertwined to our day-to-day and work to address them. Thankfully, one tool for coral reef recovery is coral reef restoration. And as you can see, there's only 4 steps. The first step is to collect small pieces of coral from the wild to then move to an underwater nursery where they can grow, or farm, where they get the term coral farming or coral gardening. Once you have those corals in your nursery, you then will propagate them or fragment them to create additional colonies that will then grow as well, to the point that you'll have a sustainable source of corals in your nursery that you can then transplant back to local reefs and restore those ecosystems. So to visualize this and the tens of thousands of corals that we're out planting around the year, I broke it down. So here's step 2, where we're growing these corals in underwater nurseries, with the image on the left showing brand new pieces of staghorn coral, and the image on the right, a year later, now with many more branches and tissues available for restoration. So once you have that new coral tissue, you can then transplant back to the reef. So on the left, you can see a small fragment of staghorn coral that we transplanted to a local reef with hammer, nail, and cable ties. And then a year later on the right, you can see that healthy adult colony that's contributing to shoreline protection, habitat, and coral recovery. Eventually, as we scale up to tens of thousands, we can actually rebuild reef ecosystem, which is the ultimate goal. But with all of that being said and all those successes, we realize that there's still a significant gap And we need to work to bridge science and society, because we can't rely on science alone to restore the future of coral reefs. So we built Rescue a Reef, this community program that aims to engage the public so that together we can build community and coastal resilience through our research, restoration, and citizen science activities for individuals to actually come on the boat with us and help restore local coral reef populations. Hopefully then becoming more knowledgeable, engaged, and aware so that they can advocate for the conservation of corals in their own communities. So I'll revisit that picture showing a local coral reef and a year after our restoration, that kind of transformation that's done for the people, by the people. So with that, I will pause briefly on this page that contains our Rescue a Reef handles, as well as my contact information, so that all of you can take a quick screenshot or photo, because I would love to hear your questions either now or later down the road. And then I'll hand it back over to you, Umberto.
Great, thank you so much, Dalton. That was fantastic. I've been a huge fan of Rescue Reef, and you guys have been a partner since our second residency. So I feel like we've grown together. And by the way, I realize it's your 5th anniversary.
Yes.
So congratulations, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Great, so now on to Myra Cruz. Myra is the Climate Resilience Program Manager at Catalyst Miami. She manages CLEAR, Community Leadership on the Environment, Advocacy and Resiliency, and HEAL, Housing, Equity, Advocacy and Leadership, which provide training around social justice and community organizing around the issues of climate change and affordable housing, respectively. Collectively, the programs have graduated over 300 leaders who are more civically engaged and advocating for resilient solution to Miami's most pressing problems. She also supports Catalyst's work around disaster preparedness and advocating for equitable resilient strategies for vulnerable communities. As a member of the Miami Climate Alliance, she advocates for access to clean energy for low-wealth communities. Myra Cruz, you are welcome to share your screen now. Thank you. And welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and really helping us bridge the gap and understanding how issues like sea level rise are impacting the communities that are in our own very backyards.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all of you for attending this webinar. I know there's a lot of different things that feel like they're on fire right now, so I appreciate you all being here to learn more about these issues. So I'm glad that Dalton touched on that intersection between society and science. That's definitely our sweet spot with Catalyst Miami. So just to give you a quick background, at Catalyst, we've been around for over 2 decades. We're a nonprofit here, and really you can see our vision and mission statement, but really what it boils down to is that we want to improve the health and wealth of our low wealth communities. And I use wealth on purpose to encompass not just income, but also historically the amount of wealth that you've accumulated over time. But at Catalyst, we provide direct services to people for free, financial services, we provide healthcare access work, and as mentioned in my bio, we also provide leadership programs for free to our community members who want to learn more about the exact issues that we're discussing today and ways to become civically engaged and using that knowledge to really advocate for the solutions that they want to see in their own communities. Michael Clarkson, who you saw in the video, he's a CLEAR graduate and has been doing amazing organizing work for decades now. So we were super lucky to have him be a part of this program. So just quickly, climate gentrification. Hopefully the fancy little GIF I found is working for you all. So you've all probably heard about gentrification. Climate gentrification, basically, let me walk you through the process. So we have developers here, of course. We know due to sea level rise and other climate change impacts, as the image on the left shows, that beachfront properties will no longer be around in the future decades to come due to these impacts. And so developers are thinking, okay, we probably doesn't make sense for us to keep developing on Miami Beach and these other coastal communities. Where should we go next? Where does it make sense for us to do long-term development, for example? Where should we put our money? So, you know, they've looked further inland, and you can see that Little Haiti and Liberty City in particular are outlined in this image. So you can see even with like surge flooding, this is 2 feet by 2050, these communities are safe from those impacts. If you look to the image to your right, you can see that Little Haiti in particular, you know, isn't projected to have as much flooding as like other parts like the Upper East Side in Miami. So developers are thinking, okay, it makes sense for us to go into these communities. These are historical communities that have been here for a long time. I would be remiss not to connect this back to the Black Lives Matter movement, because these are historically Black neighborhoods. And so my point is that, you know, Black communities also matter. So what are really like the impacts of climate gentrification, of the fact that, you know, development is happening in these higher lying areas? So as Michael mentioned in the video, we have things like the Magic City Innovation District that have been proposed. You can see the image to the left. It looks really fancy, looks really snazzy. Has it been created with the community's full input throughout the process? No. This is, you know, a giant like 40-story complex that has been proposed, and there has been an ongoing fight within the city of Miami with Little Haiti residents and community members leading the fight on this. So I really want you to think through, you know, what does it mean to push these communities out in order to build these new high rises, these new fancy buildings, this development that doesn't necessarily reflect what's already historically been there for so many years. You know, the impact of families needing to move out. We talk a lot about needing social cohesion and having communities know each other when a disaster happens. Once people move out, you know, we don't know where they end up. We've heard stories of people anecdotally who have been bought out, and they might end up in places like Homestead and further like to Doral or further north. And sometimes they end up in areas that are even more vulnerable to sea level rise and climate change, to hurricanes, because they end up in lower lying areas, so they have less protection. There isn't any sort of programs in place or any ways of tracking people that might be bought out by developers in this community. So that's something that is definitely worrisome as this phenomenon of climate gentrification keeps happening. Also thinking about, you know, there's families that might be in foreclosure, for example, and get these developers know that they're going through this situation, this financial hardship, and they prey on them and take advantage of that. And so they might buy them out now, knowing that in a few years their property will skyrocket, but people don't know that all the time. It's not something that is commonly known sometimes. So there's a lot of issues there of communities being taken advantage of and not knowing really what their rights are and what they can do to stop this issue, which is why programs like CLEAR and HEAL and the work that CLEO does with climate education is so important to connect those dots. So the last thing I'll say is that there are so many organizations that are working on these issues. So I've highlighted a few here, and in my PowerPoint, which hopefully will get shared out, we'll also have links to other organizations that are working on this, but especially places like SMASH that work on affordable housing issues, Unite Here, which is a labor union group here that has been fighting to get you know, those that live in like Little Haiti, for example, to have jobs once this, you know, complex might go up, to make sure that they've directly benefit financially from this complex. Groups like the Miami Climate Alliance that do a great job of being intersectional when it comes to climate change impacts and the way that it impacts immigrants, the way it impacts you know, those that are lower wealth. There's so many groups that are involved within that alliance. FOM, which is a group that works specifically with the Haitian community and working on immigrant rights. Miami Worker Center. There's so many, and this is not exhaustive. But if you're really passionate about getting to work on these issues, this would be a really great start. And so I hope to hopefully see you in future meetings, future community groups, CLEAR, HEAL, whatever it is. I'm here as a resource for you all. And that is my contact information. I'll also put it in the chat for you all. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Myra, so much. And thank you for providing that slide with the recommendations about some of these amazing organizations that are doing so much for those communities. And I'm sure there is a lot that we can all do to participate and make things better. So I really appreciate your sharing the knowledge and again, helping us understand how these dots are connected. Now, last but not least, it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to Delaney Reynolds. Delaney is a climate activist, founder of Sink or Swim Project, and also a Clio Institute Young Leadership Circle member. She's been called one of the leading voices for the environment for her generation by Philippe Cousteau, an eco-warrior by David Smith, and an incredibly valuable force of nature by Caroline Lewis of the Clio Institute. Delaney is a marine science student at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science in Miami, Florida, and splits her time between the cosmopolitan city of a few million people and a 1,000-acre island with 43 solar panel homes in the Florida Keys called No Name Key. Like the state of Florida, Delaney's life is surrounded by water, and that's where her love for the environment comes from. She's the founder and CEO of an NGO, the Sink or Swim Project, and its popular website, miamisearise.com, an educational and political advocacy organization focused on a variety of environmental topics, including climate change and sea level rise. Delaney, welcome, and please feel free to, there you are. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Delaney, for being with us. I mentioned I've been a huge fan of yours for many years, so I couldn't be happier to have you as being part of this panel. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It truly is an honor. And thank you to everyone attending for being with us this evening. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So, okay. So first and foremost, happy World Oceans Day. And again, thank you for joining us. As you heard, my name is Delaney, and today Umbretta has asked me to talk a little bit about how I became involved with climate change and also a little bit about the youth movement and perspective, what we kind of think about climate change and what's been happening. So as a short introduction, I'm currently 20 years old, and as Umbretta said, I'm a student at the University of Miami. I'm now a senior. Time has flown by. I was born here in Miami, Florida, born and raised, but I actually grew up splitting my time between Miami and a very small 1,000-acre island in the Florida Keys called No Name Key that actually now, post-Hurricane Irma, instead of having 43 homes, has 40 solar-powered homes on it. So we were hit pretty hard. But it's in the middle of 2 wildlife refuges, and it is incredible. It's a fantastic place that I have loved growing up in. And so because I grew up there in part, I grew up learning about sustainability and just loving the ocean, everything about it. And ultimately, my love for nature led me to write, illustrate, and publish 3 children's books on ecology topics in between elementary and middle school. And as I was researching for these books, I learned more and more about climate change, how it was impacting the Florida Keys, the state of Florida, and really the entire world. And it was then that I decided that I wanted to start writing my 4th book on climate change and sea level rise, how it was impacting South Florida. So I started to interview scientists to learn as much of the science as I could, business and homeowners to learn how they were being affected firsthand, as well as politicians to learn what they were doing in their communities, if anything. And eventually I decided that I wanted to take everything that I was learning and also share it with other kids, because I believe that climate change is the biggest issue that our generation will ever face. So what I did is I created a nonprofit organization called the Sink or Swim Project. And through the Sink or Swim Project, I mostly give lectures to people of all ages, but most specifically with a focus on children, because like I said, I believe that this is the most significant issue that our generations will face. And what we do to solve it will define our time here on this planet. So I am pleased to tell you that kids get it. Kids understand climate change. When I lecture to them, I don't dumb down the material. I use real scientific data from IPCC reports, NASA, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they understand every bit of it. So in fact, the response that I get from children is often better than adults. During Q&A sessions after my lectures, kids have more questions, better questions, especially about how they can solve the climate change crisis, how they can become involved in their school, their home, their community. And that's a lot better than some adults even ask. And that gives me tremendous hope for the future, tremendous hope that we will be able to invent new technologies, implement innovative solutions, and ultimately solve our climate change crisis. The other aspect of the Sink or Swim project is political advocacy. So I've worked with a number of local, state, and federal politicians to create funding, raise awareness, and even implement laws related to climate change. In fact, 3 years ago today, I was actually in New York City speaking to the United Nations General Assembly for World Oceans Day, and you can see a picture of that on the left on your screen. As another example, in the picture on the right, I'm actually speaking to the City of South Miami Commission in favor of a solar power mandate law that I wrote and that was passed in 2017, making the City of South Miami the first city in the state of Florida and Florida the second state in the United States to have a law that requires homeowners to install solar power. Another example of my political advocacy work is the Florida climate change lawsuit. So in April of 2018, 7 of my friends and I filed a lawsuit against the state of Florida governor, his cabinet, and the Commissioner of Agriculture to demand that they uphold their environmental duties that are outlined in the Florida Constitution and something called the Public Trust Doctrine, which say that they must protect our waters, land, and our atmosphere. So although we filed over 2 years ago, April 2018, we just had our first hearing last week, and the judge acknowledged the state's motion to dismiss, and unfortunately, he did rule to dismiss our case, but we are now working to put together an amazing appeal and file that at the First District Court of Appeals. So our case is far from over, and me and my co-plaintiffs are very hopeful for the future of the case, and we're still very optimistic. There are also other such suits all over the United States and also throughout the world. There are suits in Alaska, Washington. There was one in Colombia that was actually just won, which is super exciting and very promising. And the Trump administration has also fought a similar federal case tooth and nail every step of the way, as you may expect. But young people, just like us, we must start somewhere, even if it's a long, hard fight. That's just how social justice is achieved. It's never easy, but it is totally possible. And luckily, there is a lot of hope for the future when it comes to the youth generation and fighting climate change. We see all over the world that youth are standing up and speaking out for causes that they believe in, whether it's the recent Black Lives Matter protests or climate strikes like this one that you see on your screen in Miami Beach that was actually organized by the Clio Institute's Gen Clio group. I'm happy to say that the youth generation is fed up with our government's complacency and denial of climate change. We're now striking and organizing to work with them to create the solutions that we need. And if they refuse to do so, then we're just waiting for the day that we can take their place in office. Thank you again for having me. I look forward to answering your questions. If you want to connect, you can reach me on social media at Miami Sea Rise or check out our website, miamisearise.com, and I can put those links in the chat as well. So thank you.
Wow, Delaney, that is fantastic. And I'm just so thrilled to end this on such a high note. And your enthusiasm and your force is incredible. And I was actually attending a summit today for World Oceans Day, the UN organized, and there were several youth organizers and activists like yourself. And it really, as you said, that's really what's giving us hope that we are on the right track. And so it's all thanks to you and to your generations. You really are an inspiration. So go Delaney. I've been seeing on the chat people saying you need to run for office. You know, give it a few years and we'll have a President Reynolds. So really, really inspiring. Thank you again. So now, if I may ask all of our panelists to turn on your video and your audio on. I am, hopefully the internet will stay with us. Again, apologies for the interruption earlier, and hopefully we'll be able to get back on track. And I wanted to open it up to internal discussions amongst you guys, and see if you have questions for each other, comments. I do have a few to kind of break the ice, no pun intended. And then we'll be opening up to Q&A. So this is actually a question for you all, and please, anyone who feels like jumping in. So our knowledge of our interconnectedness and our belonging to a global community, and the way we travel and the way we communicate, has been fundamentally changed because of COVID-19, which brought the planet to a halt almost one day to the other. I wonder what you think about the impact of these experiences on the climate crisis and all the correlated issues. Do you think this will have a lasting impact? Do you think there could be some positive repercussions based on these recent experiences on the fight for the climate crisis, or better, against the climate crisis? Olivia, yay.
Sure, I'll give that one a shot. I know that a lot of us have read in the papers since COVID pandemic began that emissions did go down, and they did as a result of, you know, people staying home and industry being halted. But as we reopen our economies, I think a lot of scientists realize that that is really just a temporary change that we're seeing, and especially when governments are really anxious to jumpstart the economies again, that some of those wins that we saw in reduction emissions will just be sort of offset by an acceleration of the economy in the future. That being said, I do think that on a personal level, and I speak for a lot of people that I know, and I've had conversations in my own community, that COVID has made us reflect upon deeper issues in our lives. You know, what's really meaningful to us. And I think the thing with climate change is, you know, we need to take personal action. We need to be advocates, but essentially we need a shift in values, a global shift in values to make this work. And sometimes you need a crisis like this to create a catalyst for us to sort of think about what that really means for us. And so for me personally, for example, I really don't need much to be happy. And that means reducing my consumption, and reducing our consumption globally could really help climate change. So in that way, I think the crisis can help us tackle the climate crisis, just sort of those internal reflections. But again, that's coming from a privileged point of view. I have access to healthcare. I was not, you know, I did not get COVID. I was able to keep my job during the crisis and stay home and work. And I know it's been very difficult for a lot of other people who've had completely different experiences and experienced family loss as well. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Lila. Anyone else would like to jump in? Delaney, any thoughts from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty positive about what the world will look like after the COVID crisis. I think that it's proven that as a society, we can come together and work together as a community. We can work for each other's benefit. And if that's the case, then we can definitely do that for our planet's benefit. We can work together, implement the solutions that we need. And another hope of mine coming out of COVID-19 is that people will perhaps have a newfound appreciation for scientists and the science that they report and publish. Because if they can trust that what they're publishing about COVID-19 or the vaccines that they're working on for COVID-19 work and are accurate, then the same is the case for climate change. So we can look at the science, we can acknowledge that our planet is warming, that fossil fuels and humans are the cause, and hopefully people will start to realize that denial isn't so just, you know. So I'm very hopeful for what the future could look like. I think that it's proven a lot about our world and our society.
Great, thank you. Now, a question from Myra, but it's really anyone who wants to jump in. So climate justice is intertwined with every single impact of a warming planet, from climate gentrification, as you just spoke about, to climate refugees. Now, we know that equitable countries, and often we look at Northern Europe, overall perform better in environmental matters. I wonder if you can share, where do you think the US and specifically stand on these issues? Do we have, I mean, probably the recent and the actual administration probably is obviously not doing a great job, but I wonder if you can maybe speak about policies in Miami that are addressing the issues that you're working with day in, day out. Are there successful policies out there that the city is implementing to tackle those issues?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, yes, I think when we look at the US as a whole and what we're doing at the federal level, I think Olivia and I were just talking earlier today about the fact that it seems like every day there's rollbacks of EPA laws have been in place, NEPA, for example, laws that are meant to protect us and our environment and our health, especially during a pandemic. But locally, I mean, I think what I've been really amazed by, and I think what like the shining spot is here in Miami, is that there are so many groups, the people who are on this panel, others that I mentioned earlier, other groups outside of that, that are working to tackle these issues from different perspectives. We have groups that, work on workers' rights and those that work in extreme heat, for example, and have pushed to pass legislation for that just this past legislative season. Unfortunately, that didn't pass. We need a lot more people to speak up on these issues and to be educated on them. But there are pushes locally to ensure that especially our most vulnerable are being taken care of and are able to thrive in these changing environments. But thinking about how the city is doing and the county, I mean, I think both the Office of Resilience at the city and the county level have been great partners to us. We, always try to include them in the work that we're doing and vice versa. I think those are two fantastic offices that really do try to include community input in the work that they're doing and do outreach. When you look at the administrations themselves, there's more to be said there. But I think it's why people that are on this panel, it's why the groups that are here, the people that we represent, that's why we're really important part of the equation, because the more that we educate ourselves, the more that we can push for changes, the more we can show up at meetings. So that's really something I want to implore on all of you. If you haven't ever tried to attend a commission meeting on the city or the county level, this is a really, really, really great and like a critical time to do that, not just for this work, but like for racial justice work and everything else that's been going on.
Great, thank you so much, Myra. We have some great questions from the audience, so I'm just going to start going through some of them. And Dalton, the first one is for you. Someone's asking, how effective has coral farming been or is projected to be? And then she says, restoration doesn't seem like a feasible solution considering the rate of coral bleaching.
Yes, thank you. And it's a really important question. So to answer the first part, coral farming or gardening and coral restoration has been highly successful. We've been able to scale up to grow tens of thousands of corals, outplant tens of thousands per year. So in that respect, we're having a lot of success and we're seeing population recovery. As well as the number of tools that we've discovered that can really supplement that. Meaning we've identified resilient coral genotypes, resilient coral species, we've figured out how best to design sites, and so we're getting very smart at how to restore coral populations and really ensure that those environmental services are available. But we are not under the assumption that we can bank on that alone, right? Unless we also address coral bleaching events and disease, intensifying storms, point source pollution from local communities, overfishing, we're gonna still see some coral decline because that's really the heart of the matter. And so we see coral restoration as a tool to promote recovery, but it's really on us as a society to ensure that we're also enacting better policy, thinking about our day-to-day lives, what type of energy resources we're reliant on, to better blend those two things, to make them more complementary. And so that's what I was getting at with Rescue Reef, trying to bridge science and societies, because we need to be working in concert. So all of our expeditions are very educational based, so that we can hopefully have individuals leave more confident, so that they can better communicate these issues, the tools available, so that they start attending these local town hall meetings and actually chiming in to direct policy, because that's really where we're going to see positive change in coral reef recovery long term.
Great. And someone else is asking if you're only based in Miami or if you have outposts in other parts of Florida.
Yeah, so Rescue Reef is only based in Miami because it's essentially an extension of our coral research lab here at the University of Miami. So we're an incredibly small team that's mostly student and volunteer led. But as I kind of mentioned, coral restoration is occurring globally now. So essentially any area with coral reefs near and far around the world, there's likely a coral gardening and restoration program, because that's how alarming and serious the problem has become. So I can't say that all of those restoration programs will have volunteer or citizen science opportunities like we do, but there's a chance they will, because I work pretty hard actually to try and encourage more coral restoration programs to get the general public involved, because their participation and support is really vital.
Great, thank you very much. Another question for anyone who wants to jump in, and it's a big one. How can we make businesses and corporations more accountable for the adverse effects they have on the environment? Olivia, you want to take that?
Sure, I'll start. At CLIO, we like to say that we have 3 superpowers: power of our vote, our voice, and our purse. The power of our vote, we encourage everyone to vote in every single election. Elections across the United States in the last several years have been won by just a few hundred votes. So when we hear people say that voting doesn't matter, it's not true. Power of our purse, that's one way that we can hold companies accountable. We support organizations, local business that we know are doing something that's good for the environment rather than the opposite. So that's one way, but of course the power of your voice is probably in some ways the most powerful tool that you have. And everyone on this panel has spoken to that. This is what Delaney does. Dalton was just talking about policy, and Maida as well. You have to start reaching out to your elected officials. First, I would say get educated, read, find out what the policies are in your area. Find out who your elected officials are. Do you know who your commissioner is? Do you know who your district representative is? Your senators? Contact them, write emails, letters. You know, the more we speak out, the more they listen to us. And they're there, they work for us. It's not the other way around. So we always at CLIO encourage people, when you're unhappy with something, you have to speak up. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. The city and county have meetings. Right now they're virtual, so you can join those meetings as well. But otherwise you can go to commission meetings and you can stand up and you can have an opportunity to talk. So I guess I just highly encourage you to read and get educated, and then use the power of your voice to make change in the community.
Awesome, thank you, Olivia. And we have time for one more question, and this is from Trish to Myra and Delaney. How do we reach youth in communities that will be disproportionately affected by climate change, like some of the communities that Myra identify as particularly at risk? Any recommendations from either Myra or Delaney?
Yeah, I can go first. I know Delaney will have a lot of great information to add as well. I think, honestly, like, I will toot my own horn and CLIO's horn as well. I think the programs that we offer are really important in bridging that gap. I think the fact that we provide free programming on these issues, and the fact that we offer them, you know, at times that are best for people that are working during the daytime, I think things like those matter. You know, it's easy to take that for granted, but I think, you know, if you can offer programs that offer, for example, like interpretation, that you are able to help with like transportation. Of course, like now we don't have to worry about those things, but even more reason to make things accessible, right? you know, offering childcare. Like those are ways to get communities involved, especially the ones that we're talking about now, especially that are most vulnerable to these impacts. I think it's just a matter of being really intentional. And also, if you're not sure where to get started, start having these conversations, especially if you are part of those communities, like figure out like what do people really care about? What are ways that we can start bridging that gap? And also make it fun. Like kids, you know, for us, we have a youth component to our Clear and Heal programs where it's very hands-on. We try to make it very tactile. Kids get to play with like solar powered bugs and do, you know, clay models of sea level rise, or we use ice to show what happens. Like things like that make it fun and make it more accessible for them to learn at the same time. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Great, thank you. Myra. Delaney, any comments you'd like to add?
Yes, I would agree with everything that Myra said. Absolutely. A lot of the work that I do with such communities, I will go to them. That's what one of the great things about what I do is that I always go to the school and bring my resources to them so that they don't have to go and find it on their own. And then I'll also provide them with everything that I've essentially created. So anything that I've ever done, if they're interested in it, then I will share it with them. So whether it's letters that I've written to politicians, presentations that I've given, resources that I've written, whether it's books or comic books, I share that with them all for free, just so that they can have those materials and access to them. And often they will follow up with me on how they've been able to use that, whether it's with their peers in their home, with others in their community. So staying engaged is really important as well, following up to continue that conversation, especially with youth. That's what I would add to that, but Myra pretty much said it all.
Great, thank you. So since I never got to share with you all the choral sonata ringtone, I wanted to see if Carolina was able to get the link from online. Carolina, are you there?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes,
Can you share your screen?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry we didn't get to the very end of that video, but you can find it on our website. It's artsale.info under the Residence for Cecilia trip. But what I wanted to say is that besides the actual soundscape that the Cecilia and Kerwin created, they also created a ringtone that can be downloaded from this platform that Carolina just put up on the screen. It's tunes.co. And it's a 30 seconds calm ringtone that again was edited with sound of the marine life that was recorded during the expedition. So Carolina, you can hit play.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Oh, it stopped. All right. Well, I guess again, technology it's not it's not with us today. So that is a combination of toadfish and dolphins and parrotfish. And I know it sounds really calm and not quite loud, but I've had it for a few months and I have to say it's very impactful. So I encourage you all to go on tunes.co and look for the Choral Sonata ringtone. Both for Android and Apple devices. It's only $1.29. And it's a great way to talk about coral and the plight of coral reefs and coral bleaching. So I want to thank you all guys so much. And again, apologies to you and to the attendees for the internet issue we encountered. But I'm glad we managed to get back on track. You guys were amazing. Thank you for all the knowledge and the enthusiasm that you share with us. Thank you to the audience for being with us and for your questions. This webinar has been recorded, so you will all receive a recording of it. And again, if you have any questions that were unanswered, please send them to me. You should have it on your communication from Zoom, but again, it's ombretta@artsale.info. And again, thank you guys so much and happy World Oceans Day 2020 to all.
Thank you.
Thank
Umberto.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
Take care.